This incredible journey is the result of teamwork between the UNN Protectorate and the incredible scientific minds at the newly relicensed Tri-Optimum Corporation. Imagine being able to travel to distant star systems in a period of weeks. It's all part of Tri-Op's commitment to the future.
They're not gonna get me. They're not gonna change me.
Released in 1999, System Shock 2 was created with the joint effort between Looking Glass Studios and Irrational Games. Running on the Dark engine, which was also used for Looking Glass Studios' Thief series, the original concept for the game was supposed to be based off the Joseph Conrad story, Heart of Darkness, where the player would be tasked with assassinating a starship captain who had gone insane. With much of its gameplay and overall design philosophy based on the 1992 Ultima Underworld, Underworld also being a primary inspiration for the original System Shock, the game was originally titled as Junction Point and was pitched to various publishers. One of those publishers was EA, who at the time owned the rights to the System Shock franchise. It was suggested that the game be a sequel to System Shock, and the team agreed. Various changes were made to the game's story to incorporate it into the System Shock universe, and on August 11th, 1999, after an 18th-month dev time, System Shock 2 was released to the public. So before we start this time around, we're going to have to talk about some mods. They're not entirely necessary to play the game, but they make a good thing They make a good thing better. First, you're going to need the SS2 tool. This operates as a nice little all-in-one patcher and mod organizer for the game. I'm not going to go terribly into depth into the other mods you're going to need, but I will leave a link to a modding guide in the description. When you're all done, your mod list should look something more or less like this. Now, with that out of the way, we can jump into the game's story. Our story starts at a UNSC recruitment center. Looking to do our part, we're offered some basic and advanced training, but who has time for all that? The horrors of deep space wait for nobody. Now we get to pick our branch of the military. This will determine our base skills, stats, and starting equipment. We have the Marines, the Navy, and the Weird Boys. My heart says I'm a Navy boy, but the voices tell me to... After we pick our branch, we get to pick 3 different posts, which describe the next 3 years of our military career. Just go with your heart. After these first 3 deployments, we're put into hypersleep and chucked aboard the Von Braun. This seems oddly familiar. Time passes until we're met with a rude awakening. And gods below, who cut our hair? I know the service isn't known for its barbers, but god damn, we got done dirty. God damn. After that shocking revelation, we find out we're about 2 minutes away from being sucked out into the vacuum of space. Oh joy. So we grab a wrench, a battery, we punch the IMSIM number into a keypad, and we're home free. Well, relatively speaking, that is.
Good. You've managed to get out before the whole area depressurized.
It's here we get a proper introduction to our host, one Janice Polito. She's a little bossy, a little mean, but she seems to know what's going on, so we might as well blindly do what she says. She also gives us some
cybernetic modules.
And get used to that voice line, because we're going to hear it. We're going to hear a whole lot of it. As we take our first steps into the Von Braun, we're greeted with its ominous, empty corridors, its visages of death and destruction, the calls and howls of the subhuman mutants, and that absolutely radical soundtrack. So we wander around the medical deck, vibe to the soundtrack, fight mutants armed with pipes, shotguns, and whiskey, and fight the nightmare monkeys, all the while searching for some nerd and his keycards. Dr. Watts, the nerd in question, isn't doing so hot when we find him, but we get what we need, fight our first robot, and head down to engineering. We've got some problems down in engineering, paramount of which is the radiation, but thankfully it's nowhere near as bad as... We've also got some more robots, and finally we get a better look at our host.
Our biology yearns to join with yours.
I can't decide on what joke to make about what this looks like, so I'm just gonna move on. We stumble around, get lost in the cargo bays, because we always get lost in the cargo bays. Find the fluidics control code, go find the board that we need. We head up to the deck, put the board in the slot, flush the radiation, tinker with the engines, and now we're good to go back to the elevator. What the hell was that? Nope. Ugh. It looks like we can't get up to deck 4 because the elevator shafts are filled with... Ugh. So we're gonna have to find a way to deal with that. First, we have to find out how we're gonna fight this infestation, and to do that, we're gonna have to put a point in research. Luckily, Polito has us covered. Or we can just use this lab assistant implant we found. So we finish our research, discover that the canisters can kill the... Ugh. So we start finding these canisters and shoving them into the vents. We do this 3 times, realize we never picked up the 4th canister, and stumble around like a jackass until we find it in this corpse, shove it in the last vent, and now we can finally go up to deck 4 to meet Polito. Okay, so from here on out, there be spoilers. So ye've been warned. I don't know why I said that like a pirate, but yeah, spoilers ahead. So yeah, if you don't want spoilers, go to about here. So moving on. So about Polito. Turns out she's been dead all along, and we've been talking to Shodan, which honestly isn't the biggest surprise. I mean, Xerxes basically spells it out for you, and she's on the cover, for Pete's sake. So, it looks like she spent a lot of time going into this, planning out this unmasking. So, I guess we'll give her this one. We'll just let her have that. And with her introduction out of the way, we continue working for her. Even though we know who she is, I'm just gonna keep on doing what we were doing. But I mean, what's the worst that could happen? Besides, some people like being called mean names.
You move like an insect. You think like an insect. You are an insect.
Now, the actual horrifying reveal of this level is that those godless ninjas are back. A wise man once said you can never detect a ninja's absence, only their direct presence. I think he wrote a paper on it. Either way, their presence is detected. Why are you here? Who keeps making them? Okay, there are 4 red ninjas on this deck, and each one of those guys has a key card. We need those key cards so Shodan can do some Femcel nerd garbage. We're also going to run into some pretty generic spiders, discover that the hybrids have picked up yet another bad habit, and explosives, and the ceiling eggs. Get used to the ceiling eggs, because you're going to find them from here on out. You're going to find a whole lot of them. So, we get our cards and we move on to... I have good news. I am pleased to inform you that they have indeed added sex to System Shock. The bad news is we're not here for that. We're here to look at paintings. Paintings that have passcodes hidden in them. So we'll grab an emotional support pillow, grab a floaty, safety first, and start our scrub for those numbers. We visit some awful gardens, see a robot Kool-Aid man through a wall, and wander in circles for about an hour. After we get our numbers, we'll power up the pool, punch in the code, get dunked, and head up to the center spire and head off to... So Shodan is almost ready to go to the Rickenbacker, but before we can do that, we have to get an override card for the ops deck. We fight some more dumbass spiders, take advantage of some anti-rumbler geometry, grab our card, take a quick trick back to ops, go down back to the reactor core, then head back up to command. Some nerd wants to fight us IRL, so we head up to the bridge and shoot his jellyfish-looking ass. But we're not done with him yet. The jellyfish ain't all there is, so we gotta go find... How short of a straw do you have to pick for the alien worm creatures to Cronenberg your ass into that old lady from SpongeBob? Or this thing. Ugh. Now we're off to. Unfortunately, from here on out, the game gets extremely linear. The Rickenbacker doesn't even have a proper map. We'll destroy some limited edition eggs, fight our way to an escape pod, but we're not going to use that to escape. We're going to fire it directly into... Ugh. 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 Yuck. Ugh. Ugh. I don't like this place. Thankfully, we're not going to be here long. We're going to shoot some tender bits to open up sphincter doors. Get reminded how awful platforming is in the Dark Engine, or just sloped floors in general. I swear moving around this flesh pit is more painful than the Starship colonoscopy we just gave it. Do some circle strafing and nutshot the many and escape through... You know what? I'm not going to make any guesses. It's what this is. It's probably better that way. Where the f*** are we? So, it turns out that Shodan never intended to destroy the Von Braun, and was just using us the whole time. No surprise there. What is a surprise is what she plans doing with this ship. She's on some real Saturday morning cartoon shit, and plans to use the ship's FTL drive to merge her consciousness with reality and become God. With her consciousness looking a lot like some deja vu. She's also turned the ninjas translucent. That bitch! We find some parting logs Delacroix left behind, grab a stash at the top of the spire, and then descend below to deal with Shodan proper. There are a couple ways we can deal with this, but we're going to hack the terminals and shoot her Bride of Frankenstein looking ass when she comes up. And with that, we're rewarded with one of my all-time favorite video game endings.
I don't understand. How could you have done this?
You weren't meant
To be important. And now you think to destroy. You think to destroy me. dare you, insect? How dare you interrupt my ascendance? You are nothing. A wretched bag of flesh. What are you compared to my magnificence?
But it is
Not too late. Can you not see the value in our friendship? Imagine the powers I can give to you, human. The cybernetic implants I gave you were simply toys. If I desired, I could improve you, transform you into something more efficient. Join me, human, and we can rule. And we can rule together.
Nah.
There are some folks out there who really, really hate this ending, but goddamn, I love it. The disrespect you give her when she's just 2 steps away from becoming a legit god, and just nah. It's too good. But after that, we'll get some sequel bait, and then the credits roll.
Don't you like my new look?
The gameplay here is a pretty standard fare. You're dropped into semi-open levels, stitched together with loading doors. The player movement feels pretty good most of the time, assuming you're on flat ground. It's a little slippery at times, but that's just the Dark Engine. The game allows you to jump and climb up on ledges, which overall is a pretty small thing, but I just really appreciate it. It just adds that little more to that feeling of player agency, that you can actually jump around and explore stuff, and it's always nice jumping into some place you thought maybe you wouldn't be able to get to find a bunch of goodies in there. You're given a good old grid inventory, which you can use to carry various stims, snacks, the game pig, pieces of your enemies, and of course weapons. Weapons that vary from standard stuff like your pistol, shotgun, rifle, and of course your trusty wrench for when you just gotta bonk a. You can also spec your character for less standard type weapons, like laser weapons, heavy weapons, and a few more exotic weapons, using weapons crafted from the mass of the many. But unfortunately, there isn't much there, and what does show up really only shows up in the later game. You can also go the weird boy route and use your military-grade Fushigi ball to kill things with your mind, and set yourself on fire. But weaponized brain freeze and self-immolation aren't the only fun you can have with your magic ball. It also lets you buff yourself, spawn ammunition, make enemies fight for you, etc. Most of your weapons will degrade over time and with more use, which raises their chances of jamming up, requiring the player to repair it. This feels like as good a place as any to talk about some of the skills in the player progression. Unlike System Shock 1, we have some good old RPG progression. The player receives and finds cyber modules that can be used to upgrade various stats, skills, and psionic powers. And, much like the Rickenbacker, these are kinda wonky. You have your standard stats, like strength, endurance, agility, that buff the player in various ways. There are also a number of skills, and these range from mandatory, like having some sort of weapon skill, to completely useless. And that's not a hyperbolic statement. There are a few skills here that are almost totally useless. Those skills being repair and modify, of all things. Now, you'd think those skills would come in handy, considering your situation, but, well, you'd be wrong. Throughout the game, you're going to find more than enough items that just allow the player to repair a broken weapon or repair a broken machine and to upgrade it or to add a weapon upgrade. So as long as you're keeping your gear well maintained with the plentiful maintenance tools you're going to find and can even buy at certain vending units, you're never going to need either of these skills, and they're just a complete sink of cyber modules. Much like the first game, System Shock 2 is one of my all-time favorites, and this time around it's much easier to recommend. The soundtrack and the atmosphere are both wonderful. Exploring the ship is always plenty of fun, and the player has plenty of opportunities to find hidden goodies and experiment with all the toys at their disposal. You're given a lot of freedom to tackle obstacles, or at least, combat. Whether you treat it like a standard shooty affair, or you're hacking turrets, or using the wealth of psionic abilities that are given to you. That being said, System Shock 2 isn't without its problems. It's been a while since I played through, all the way. But this time around, I really, really did notice just how chopped up the last bit of the game feels. It's like as soon as you get off the Von Braun, it is a straight shot to the ending. There is hardly anywhere to poke around, and all of the big opened up, or at least semi-open levels you've been exploring beforehand just go right away. It's almost a straight line to the end. And the whole, even after dealing with the many, the whole brief lead up to the Shodan fight feels strange. I know it would be weird if you didn't deal with Shodan at the end of the game, but when it feels so tacked on. They just made 10% of System Shock 1's medical deck, and then kind of threw some floating audio logs around, and then you have another really, really half-ass boss fight. And I know out of all the Looking Glass games, they've never really been very good with boss fights, but it's basically the exact same fight as the fight you just had, not maybe 5 minutes ago. And yeah, the whole last third of the game just feels so rushed. Another thing I noticed during this playthrough, and it's not a really bad thing per se, but in System Shock 1 you get so many little doodads and little pieces of equipment that just kind of spec onto your character. You get the jump boots and the speed boots and the surround vision, the shields, a flashlight, all the little targeting gear and all that. And in System Shocks 2, you don't really get any of that. Aside from the neuromods, which in almost every case, except for a select few, just offer a 1-point stat buff and don't really do much else other than that. It just felt weird to me. It would have been neat to see maybe a few more things that the player could do aside from armors and the neuromods that the player could equip to kind of change up their gameplay a little bit. I know a lot of the variety in the equipment was kind of pushed over to the psionics tree. Like, you can get shields and you can run fast and do all that stuff with psionics. But in order to use a lot of the psionics, you gotta dump a lot of neuromods into them. And like, if you're not doing a full-on psi character, you're probably not even gonna use most of the stuff that's there. And it just, personally, this time going through, it feels like if you wanted to just be like a standard kind of shoot man, it can feel kind of dry because there's not a whole lot you can do to kind of augment that experience without going into the psionics. Overall, though, System Shock 2 is a wonderful, wonderful experience. It's always fun to pick up and play, and every time I pick it up, I feel like I learn something new, or I find something that I didn't find before. Like, apparently there's a parry mechanic in this game where you can hit an enemy's weapon with your own to stagger it. I could never really get it to work. My timing is garbage, but apparently it's in there. So if you made it this far, thank you. I really do appreciate it. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do next, but until then, stay safe and take care of yourself.